That was so lovely, Mitchell.
Thank you.
Very, very nice. Shabbat shalom, everyone, and it's so good to see everyone tonight on this cold night. But we are feeling the warmth of Shabbat and Shabbat music. Tonight, I want to begin by examining how metaphors work. So, for example, let's take the object of a shoe. But shoes can be made into a metaphor. For example, a Native American proverb says, never judge another person until you walked a mile in his shoes. Actually, it says his moccasins. Or let's take a ladder. A ladder is an object. But Oliver Napoleon Hill, a 20th century self-help American author, once wrote an article entitled, "The Ladder of Success is Never Crowded at the top." And then, of course, it won't surprise you if we talk about masks. Masks are objects. But the great Eric Fromm wrote, "It is time to cease to argue about God and instead to unite in the unmasking of contemporary forms of idolatry." John Wellwood, an American clinical psychologist, psychotherapist known for integrating psychological and spiritual concepts, wrote the following about the topic of unmasking. He said, when we reveal ourselves to our partner and we find that this brings healing rather than harm, we are making an important discovery that intimate relationship can provide a sanctuary in the world of facades, a sacred space where we can be ourselves as we are. This kind of unmasking, he said, this kind of unmasking, of speaking our truth, of sharing our inner struggles and revealing our raw edges is sacred activity, which allows two souls to meet and to touch more deeply. So masks are both objects and they can be metaphors. So friends, one of the themes of the Hebrew Bible is the contrast between the hidden and the revealed, which in our context would mean the difference between the masked and the unmasked. Now, I have to start off by saying, just reminding everybody, we're talking about masks as metaphors tonight. This is not a sermon about masks as objects. And everybody should wear your mask by all means, keep socially distanced, wash your hands, and do all of that. I don't want anybody saying, Rabbi Gutman said we should take our masks off. Wait. But let's talk about this. The greatest of all of the biblical stories on this theme of unmasking has to be that of Esther. Esther is masked, so to speak. She hides her identity until the last moment and reveals it only after being encouraged to do so by her uncle Mordecai. I love the line when he tells her, "For if, Esther, you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance from the Jews will come from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows, Esther," Mordecai says to her, "but that you come to this position in the royal house for such a time as this. Who knows that it's not your fate to be here at this time so that you can speak up." You know, this idea of masking also is found elsewhere in Purim. Why? We dress in costumes, we wear masks. Like Esther, we hide or disguise our identity. As a matter of fact, the word Esther itself in Hebrew means hidden. And if the story of Esther is the greatest example of unmasking in the Hebrew Bible, the greatest example in the Torah would have to be found in this week's Torah portion, which we're going to study in depth. I'll be leading tomorrow's class. We'll be studying that in depth tomorrow morning. This is a continuation of the study and the story of Joseph. You guys remember Joseph? Joseph, whose father favored him so much that he gave him a coat of many colors, a royal coat, or as Mitchell would tell you in the modern theater, because I think he's produced a couple of these, a Technicolor dream coat. Who was Joseph? Joseph was the guy who was thrown in a pit with snakes and scorpions, no water, to die. And his brother's up to the top of the pit. And eventually, at the last minute, he sold to Midianite traders and then to the Egyptians. Who was Joseph? Joseph would spend a time in prison because he resisted the sexual advances of Potiphar's wife, Gavalt. Joseph didn't have much luck. Who was Joseph? Joseph was the person that had every reason in the world to hate, to detest his brothers, and to never forgive them for what they'd done to him. But Joseph, who was Joseph? Joseph was the guy that, because of his talent, had risen to the second most powerful person in Egypt. He did manage the 7 years of plenty, the 7 years of famine. He was second only to the Pharaoh. So what happens this week? Joseph's brother Judah comes before him to plead for the release of his younger brother Benjamin. Judah even offers himself as a slave to the Egyptian ruler if they'll just let Benjamin go. Now, Judah understands if he doesn't let Benjamin go, his father back in Canaan and in the land of Israel will die of sorrow. Joseph is incredibly moved by his brother's loyalty to each other. And in an emotional scene, it jumps right off the page of the emotion. Joseph reveals his identity to them by saying, I am Joseph, your brother, the one you sold into Egypt. And then he asks, is our dad still alive? Imagine the reaction of the brothers. They are dumbfounded. They are remorseful. But at that moment, Joseph tries to comfort them by saying, it wasn't you who sent me here, my dear brothers. It was God. It has all been ordained from above to save us and the entire region, the entire known world, so to speak, from famine. Boy, that line in the story, I am Joseph, your brother. I love that line. Throughout history, the relationship between the Catholic Church and the Jewish people has been extremely difficult. Years of persecution by the church included the accusation of deicide, of murdering Jesus, the Crusades, the Inquisitions of Spain and Portugal, and the silence of Pope Pius during the Nazi Holocaust and more. And perhaps as a reaction, this led rabbis in the 17th century to refer to Christmas Eve as Nittelnacht. On that day, Jews would try to remain inside and not be seen or heard, but that's not all. The most prominent custom commonly observed on Nittelnacht would be to abstain from Torah study, to stay up late and play card games or chess. Some Jewish mystics believed, this is folk legend here, that apostates were conceived on that day, and as a result, they forbade married couples from sexual relations on Nittelnacht. A messed up relationship. But the relations between Jews and the Catholic Church began to significantly improve due to one person, Pope John the 23rd, who, upon his ascent to the papacy in 1958, he said to the Jewish community, here it is, I am Joseph, your brother. And these words were repeated by Pope John II when he visited the synagogue in what used to be in the ghetto of Rome. I am Joseph, your brother. These are the great words of unmasking in this week's Torah portion. But notice the continuation of the story. Joseph says to his brothers, it was not you who sent me here, but God. It has been ordained from above to save us, the entire region from famine. Joseph is saying it's God who's the major character in the story. So it's not only Joseph who is being revealed, it's God's will which is being revealed and unmasked. The idea that God too may be masked or hidden is frequently found in the Hebrew Bible. The psalmist in Psalm 102, verse 2 says, do not hide your face from me when I'm in distress, which is like saying, Don't mask your face. Turn your ear to me, the psalmist says, when I call, answer me quickly. Or in Psalm 27, it says, do not hide your face from me. Do not thrust your servant away in anger. Do not mask your face. Again, the psalmist is saying. This is a concept called in Hebrew, hester panim, the hiding of God's face. It's actually found in modern Jewish theology in the 20th century, wherein it's discussed and trying to answer the question is why God did not do more to prevent or stop the Nazi Holocaust. So let me tell you something. Anecdotally, on 2 occasions in the past 2 weeks, I've walked around our neighborhood. We do this walk around Brown Park. If you live in there, you know what that is, about a mile each go around. But twice in the past 2 weeks, I've encountered people who said, hi, Fred, or hi, Rabbi. They were masked, but I had no idea who these people were. And then they unmasked themselves, or they identified themselves. One of the people was a wonderful pastor who had gone on one of the interfaith trips to Israel, which I led. And the other was actually a couple who had been 2 prominent members of our Jewish community. The point is that because they were masked, their identities were hidden. So likewise, when Joseph tells his brothers that they should not be afraid, he's telling them that they are not responsible, that what had occurred was part of God's overall plan, God's will being unmasked. And Joseph sees God's presence in history. By the way, I want you to know this too. We'll go back to it for just a second. The book of Esther is the only book in the Hebrew Bible that does not mention the word God. The presence of God is there, is hidden, is masked in the book. And it is our task to find God's presence when we read it. Some of you might have been attended a Jewish wedding where there's a ceremony called a bedekin. In this ceremony, which occurs before the actual nuptials, the groom unveils the bride and acknowledges, this is the girl I wish to marry. He is literally unmasking her. So in the story of Joseph, Joseph is trying to teach us that God may appear to be hidden, but God is not absent. Like the people who I encountered on my walks, their identities might have been hidden, but they were never absent as human beings in any sense of the word. We pray, therefore, as Jews, that God will not be masked or hidden when we recite the priestly blessing as we did earlier tonight. I'm going to translate it a little bit differently. It says, Yivarecha Adonai, may God bless you and keep you. And then the next line can be actually read as, may God's unmasked face shine upon you and be gracious to you. And then the third part of it say, may God lift up God's unmasked face upon you and give you shalom, peace. But why does it say unmasked face? Because quite frankly, this is where it all comes together, folks. It's in the faces of others that we can see the Tselem Elohim. It's in the faces of others that we can see the image of God. It's in the faces of others that we can really see, if we truly try, that which makes that other person so special and so incredibly holy. Wow. Therefore, seeing the face of God in others is a fundamental Jewish mandate. We Jews are not hermits. We don't go out on the mountaintop and sit alone under a tree. Rather, we believe that coming together in community is so important, because it is in community that we see the faces of family. That it's in coming together in community that when we see the faces of family and friends, we are encountering God. And friends, this is why the isolation caused by COVID-19 is so difficult for all of us. Seeing a little face this big on Zoom is not the same as seeing each other in person. We miss seeing those faces. We miss seeing each other. And we miss seeing in those faces the earthly manifestation of God's presence on earth. So tonight, folks, we pray for the day when COVID-19 will no longer be a factor in our lives. Boy, do we. We pray that we may all get the vaccine soon. By the way, after you get the vaccine, you should say a bracha, a blessing to thank God. And because of that, I've arranged to put 2 such blessings in the next bulletin, which hopefully it will be mailed and get to you before, the end of January. Should be there towards the beginning, but mail is running really late. But anyway, what I want you to do is cut out the 2 blessings, slap them on your refrigerator, and take them with you when you get vaccinated. So let's get back to the main point here. Boy, we all pray for the day in which we will be able to walk around unmasked. A day when we will no longer have to carry around those masks. But that's maskless objects. That, friends, will be only the beginning. Because again, that's the mask as an object, not as a metaphor. So on this Shabbat, wherein we read Joseph's unmasking to his brothers and his unmasking of God's presence in his life, may we too pray for the day in which we and others will be truly unmasked. A day in which, God willing, we will all be able to see the face of God in those whom we encounter. On that day, folks, not only will we all be healthy, but if we can see the face of God in the other, we will be living in a world which will be more just, more compassionate, and more filled with peace. Bimhera b'yameinu, as we say. Speedily, speedily, speedily in our own time, may this happen. May it be God's will, but perhaps more importantly, may this great unmasking of the face of God in others be our task. Shabbat Shalom.